Good day, Mr. Briggs. Please select an agent for your next mission. Scanning Imperial Agent Database. Qualified agent found. Agent ID, John Watts. Agent cover story, President, Independence Games. Details as follows.
Greetings, travelers, and welcome to Traveler Mayday 2022, sponsored by CyborgPrime Games. You can find my Facebook page by searching for my name in the Facebook search tool, or find a link in the video description below. Thank you for joining us for the 4th annual Mayday Traveler Day event. It's a day we celebrate Traveler in all its editions and offshoots for all the fun times it's given us around the gaming table with friends and family. I'm your host, Frank Succardi, also known as CyborgPrime. And today I'm happy to introduce our guest, John Watts of Independence Games. Welcome, John.
Hey, how's it going?
Great, how are you?
I'm doing well. Things are going great.
Fantastic. John, this is the 4th time you sat for an interview for the Mayday event, so thank you very much. You've been here since the beginning.
Oh, yeah, I love doing it. It's fun.
Fantastic. Hope you'll come back again next year. That'll be the 5th annual, but that'll be like a milestone. It'll be great to have. We can get all the folks who were there for the first episode to be there, or first event to be there for the last, or not last. Hopefully not the last, but yeah, for that milestone would be great. John, tell us about yourself. Introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, as you said, I'm John Watts. I am the founder, president, chief bottle washer of Independence Games. We do the Clement Sector game. We do Earth Sector, which is sort of an offshoot of Clement Sector. Then we do Rider, which is a Western using the Cepheus engine rules. And we also have another game called Action Movie Physics, which it doesn't do as well as we'd like, but it's still out there. Yeah, we put these things out. We've got a website, and we do things on Drive-Thru RPG as well.
Oh, cool. So where are you based? Where are you from?
Ringgold, Georgia. It's a small town just south of Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's just right across the border. I can actually walk outside my house and see Tennessee from where I am. So it's very close to Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've lived here for quite a while. In fact, I've lived in this particular house for 22 years. But I grew up in this town and then moved away, went to college, and then ended up coming back. And I spent several years as I spent several years working at an electrical supply, doing outside sales and deliveries and so forth. And I did a lot of that. I worked for a while as a announcer at a football stadium for a minor league football team, which I know you didn't know there was minor league football, and apparently no one else did either. That's why that didn't go anywhere. But
well, you have a good radio voice. You've got a good announcer voice, and I should know.
Well, thank you. But yeah, I've always been writing RPG stuff. I started a Traveler game in 1985. Might have been it was 1985 with some friends of mine, and we started playing that game and used those characters for years. And in 1988, I went to the University of Georgia, and when I got there, I ended up falling in with another group of gaming people, and so I kind of began mixing the groups. It was about 3 hours from here to the University of Georgia, so I would bring my friends from here to there, and we started playing a game, and several of the guys were, they really didn't care for the, as you say, space feudalism of the OTU, the official Traveler Universe.
Sure.
And so we started kind of putting together. They're like, John, you should do something. You should just pull something else together, and we'll see how we go. And that was pretty much the genesis of Clement Sector, and that campaign lasted from 1988 until I think the last time my gaming group actually got together to play. And it would have been around 2015.
Okay. And so was Traveler like your first experience with RPGs?
No, actually, it's kind of funny. I was in junior high school, which is what we call middle school here. I guess they probably do it in other parts of the country too. But I was reading a book and kind of watching. And at the time, you could opt out of playing volleyball for gym class. And I decided to opt out, and several others were opting out, and they were playing D&D. And I thought, gosh, that looks like fun. I should do that. And so I kind of tried to get involved, and well, they basically told me to pound sand.
What? Wait, you got rejected by the nerds?
I got rejected by the D&D nerds.
Oh
Yes.
no.
And yeah, so sad. And but I thought, well, gosh, this is this looks like fun though. I really want to do this. And so wasn't long after that there was one of these things, and this is a very, I don't know, I guess early 1980s sort of thing. But they had these things where you go out and sell greeting cards. You just send a kid out to go sell greeting cards to people in subdivisions and so forth. Nothing could go wrong there, right? And I did this, and one of the things you could do with your points was get a D&D box set.
Oh, that's a cool prize. You're talking about
Yeah.
like those prizes that like those things that you could you could sell like grit newspaper from the comics.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Or
And,
yeah, okay.
yeah, and they sent me this whole thing with it was greeting cards
Okay.
that I was going about selling. And so I went out there and I sold all these greeting cards, and if you got, I don't know, at 500 points or whatever it was, however many it was, you could get this D&D box set. And so I thought, well, this is brilliant. This is how I'll do this. So I went out, got all the points, came back, and my parents said, absolutely not. My mom had read
D&D is of the devil.
Right, exactly. So the whole satanic panic, the whole thing with that, and they're like, absolutely not, you're not doing this. I was like, okay, well, I guess
There
I'm
there was movies at the time about that was causing
yeah.
panic. Yeah.
My mom had read an article in one of the women's magazines. I don't remember which one, and it just absolutely, put her foot down. Absolutely not. So, fast forward a few weeks. Several of my friends and I decided we were in distance to ride to a mall that was nearby, and so we got on our bicycles and rode over to this mall, and they had a toy store in there, and walked in, and there was a Star Frontiers box set, and so I bought it and brought it home. And my dad, who is always a big Star Trek guy, was like, "Hey, that looks like fun. That's cool. You go ahead." And so, whereas I was completely and totally forbidden to play D&D, Star Frontiers was perfectly fine. And so, yeah, I started playing Star Frontiers. And about the time I got to the point where I was able to drive, I started working at a Lionel Playworld, one of these big stores. At the time, they were in competition with Toys R Us.
Okay.
And I worked there 2 or 3 years before I went to college. And while I was working there, they started carrying just a small selection of Avalon Hill and Victory Games things. And I picked up a few of the Fleet games that they made, and I also picked up the James Bond 007 RPG.
Oh, cool.
Which kind of supplanted Star Frontiers at that point, and we played that for a bit. And then somewhere along the line, we just decided we wanted to go back to science fiction. And I tell this story a lot, and it seems so strange, but in my brain, this was how it worked. I had a catalog from a place in Florida that had all these games and so forth in it. Mainly, they were selling miniatures, but they had a RPG section in the back of their catalog. And I had always seen I had always noted all of the D&D kids had books. They had lots of books. They were carrying book bags full of books. And, Star Frontiers had that one box and some modules, and that was it. The James Bond game had 3 books and, some modules. And my teenage brain said, I need a game with a lot of books. So I looked in the back of this catalog, and there was Traveler. And it had a lot of books. And so I literally got into Traveler because there are a lot of source books.
Classic Edition was cool because it was modular that way. You could just buy the books that you were concerned with. You wanted to be a scout, you get the scout book. You wanted to know about nobles, you got the noble book.
But that was the funny thing, though. I looked at that catalog and said, that game has a lot of books. And the D&D kids have a lot of books, so clearly this is the direction John needs to go. This is a
Mhm.
game with a lot of books. And so, I started buying into Traveler, and we started playing, and we had a great time with it. And for the most part, from that point forward, Traveler was really my game. I played in other things that other people other people were running, and I would occasionally run something else myself. But for the most part, Traveler was what we did. There were other people who were running Shadowrun, for instance. Shadowrun was really popular among my friends, and so we played that. I didn't actually play D&D until I had already left college. I mean, I was in my mid-20s before I actually played D&D. Which is kind of odd because I think most everyone seems to start with D&D.
Yeah, I started with D&D, and then I went to Traveler, and then similar to you but different branch. I went to Top Secret and Champions, and and so it was Traveler, Top Secret, Champions, Shadowrun. I DM'd a Shadowrun game for him.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine who ran Champions for a while, and I played in that. And then I dated a girl who ran a Champions game, and I played in that, of course. There were a few other games that we played, but for the most part, if we were getting together, if you're getting together at John's, we're playing Traveler, and that was just the sort of thing going on at the time. And when I came back up here from being in college, when I was in college, I had a group of about 5, maybe 6 guys. And when I had been here, I had a group of about 3 or 4 that were core, and we had 3 or 4 that would kind of come along. So sometimes we have 6. And on really good occasions, I would bring some of my friends from up here would come down to the college, and we'd have a group of about 9 or 10. I kind of got together I found a hobby store that was in town called the Royal Tiger, and it was in Chattanooga, and specifically the East Ridge community of Chattanooga. And I started going there and discovered that there was the guy who ran the store was running a Traveler game, and so I played in that for a short time. And then he was, John, you run a game, you should, why don't you run a game? And so ran a game there, and pretty much most of my gaming group that played tested, did all this with Clement Sector basically came from that store. I ran a game there that continued to, well after the store closed, and it was all basically based in what would become Clement Sector, that I had come up with while I was in college.
Do you have a while you were coming up with your Earth sector and all your own settings? Was there a favorite TV show or sci-fi book or movie that kind of inspired or informed that style that you were looking for your own game?
It's really funny. When the guys came to me, specifically a guy that I knew named Jimmy Henderson came to me, and he said, "Look, John, you need to come up with something else, because this isn't working for us." I was like, "Okay, well, fine, I'll see what I can do." And as it turned out, I'd say probably that same weekend, it's been several years ago, it's hard to remember exactly, but I rented Silverado, and of all things, I watched Silverado and went through the whole, the Western genre of it, and the way they move from town to town, the adventure goes with them. They're they're a little shady, but they're not completely shady. And just the entire concept of that. And that was a big influence on me. It really pushed the idea of, this is something I could do. And I remembered from the Varger source book, there's a bit in the back of the Varger source book that points out that with the way people move at the same speed as communication, that you could model that on the 1880s, and that really clicked in my head when I was watching Silverado. I remembered that statement being made in the back of the Varger source book,
Right.
and I thought, hey, this is where I need to go. And so pretty much I basically put together a space western, without realizing that I was putting together a space western. But I really built on that. The other thing that was going on at the time was I discovered Blake 7. Blake 7, for those who don't know, it's a British science fiction show. It ran for 4 seasons, I believe. It's basically about a group of people who are quite shady. There's one guy who's Blake, who is kind of a freedom fighter, and the rest of the group are actual criminals who join in, and of course, they're criminals with a heart of gold. It's also kind of Western, and
I love
so
their super shady computer expert who's a jerk, but I tend to
Haven is
like
great.
weird. Yeah, I tend to like weird characters. Like I like Dr. McKay on Atlantis because he's so annoying.
Oh, I love Rodney.
So when I saw this guy on Blake 7, I was like, this guy is my Blake 7 hero. He's my Blake 7 avatar.
And it was so odd because they were playing them on Georgia public television. And when I was living in a dorm at the University of Georgia, and we could not get reception. We didn't have cable. I mean, 1988, 89. And the odd thing was that one of the guys I knew had an apartment that was above a church. I mean, the church was, there, and then there was, right up in the top of the church. I mean, just above the sanctuary, he had an apartment. It was sort of odd. After every Sunday, we would all drive over to the church and climb up into the back, the loft, I guess, of this church, and go into this guy's apartment and watch Blake 7. And it was just the strangest thing. And we started probably in about the middle of the second season. And so it was a long time before I actually saw the first season and kind of understood better what was actually going on. But yeah, we were big on that show, and I still am, really.
Mm-hmm.
The special effects are terrible.
Yes. It's it's super cheese-delicious.
But oh yeah,
their transporter's horrible.
Oh yeah. It's the effects are terrible. I mean they really are. But I love the writing in it. I love the dialogue in it. And, some of the things Avon says, there's the one bit where they're looking for Aurak. And Gan says that he tried calling his name several times, trying to find the computer. And Avon says, oh, well, I'm sorry, I missed that. That's the sort of natural stupidity that no training could ever hope to match. Stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely loved that. And
yeah.
And so that was a huge influence on me too. So Blake 7 and Silverado particularly, but of course, like I said, my dad was a big Star Trek guy.
Uh-huh.
I watched Star Trek from I watched it in reruns. I was born in 1970, so 1973, 1974, there were reruns going on, and my dad would watch them religiously, and I would watch them alongside him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I watched a lot of Star Trek, and we saw Star Wars, and of course, Star Wars is a big deal. I did a lot of reading, particularly during that time period. I was reading Heinlein and H. Beam Piper, and got into Hal Clement, who I'm pleased to say that I was able to meet at several conventions and right around Kentucky and Ohio. I drove up there and actually got to meet him, and what a great guy. In fact, that's who Clement Sector is really named after. There's a whole story within Clement Sector that it's named after a fellow, who was a British scientist, but it was actually named after Hal Clement because I was such a big fan of his. And it was so good to actually meet him and have discussions with him.
That's a nice way to honor him.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. I had a conversation with him at it was a convention in Cincinnati, and my wife and I drove up there to it and had a nice conversation with him. And he said, John, you really ought to write something. And and at the time, I honestly just didn't have the self-confidence. I was actually talking to a friend of mine earlier today about this, and I just didn't have the self-confidence to do it. And I would say to anybody who's out there listening to this, if you're in a position where you think you can't do it anyway. Because there's nothing I regret more than not writing earlier. Yeah, and one of the reasons I went ahead and named it Clement Sector, because, like I said, we came up with this in the 1980s, and we didn't really have a name for it. It was just, John's game. And, he died not long after I had that conversation with him. And that really drove me to make sure that I continued doing what I was doing. And I hate to say that it pushed me, because it kind of, I don't know, it just sounds bad, I guess. But it really did. And I really did just, I really felt bad that I had let all that time slip by. And I still do, really. I feel bad about it. I wish I'd started earlier. So, don't make that same mistake, folks out there. Do what you love.
Don't procrastinate anymore. Get up and do it.
Yeah.
So, this year's theme is agents. Can you think of any cool sci-fi agents that you like? That would be
Oh, God.
anybody who's like a either a law enforcement agent or a private investigator, or it could be even like the prisoner. I kind of, I always try to shoot for sci-fi stuff, but on my on the Facebook group, people were like, "Well, it could be also the Man from Uncle guys and stuff." And I was like, "Well, I guess so, because there's no restriction on tech level." I was thinking more Blade Runner guy, or like Garrick from Deep Space Nine, or something like along those lines. But then somebody else was like, "Well, what about number 6?" And I was like, "Oh, that's valid too." So, do you have any space or sci-fi or spy-fi themed agents that you like?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when you say science fiction agent to me, the very first thing that pops into my mind is Heinlein's Friday. It's not the greatest book in the world, but that's the first thing that pops into my mind. But I would be completely and totally remiss if I didn't tell you that I am one of the world's biggest James Bond fans.
So there you
I
go.
mean,
Okay.
I have a huge collection of all sorts of things. I am really big into the 60s, 70s science, spy kind of thing. Um, you know, I am really big into the Avengers,
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of thing.
The Avengers,
Uh,
the Saint, Man from
right.
Uncle, the Prisoner,
I'm not
things
as
like
big a
that.
fan of I'm not as big a fan of The Man from Uncle, although I do like it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I, have a big collection of stuff from the Saint. I have a lot of the Saint novels. I've read all the James Bond books. I've got all kinds of James Bond memorabilia and stuff all over this house. I am a huge James Bond fan. So,
All right. So
yeah,
there's your
yeah, hard
answer.
hard to not mention that.
All right. There's your
So,
there's your answer. Your favorite sci-fi or spy-fi agent, James Bond. Have you heard of the Destroyer?
Destroyer. Wait,
Yeah,
no, I don't know
Remo
that.
Williams. Check it out.
Oh,
It's
yes, yes, yes.
cheesy,
Um,
pulpy spy, hilarity,
well, it's odd to say
but it's
so,
also
but
good.
one of the things that I do every evening, to kind of wind down at the end of the day, I read detective novels.
Okay.
Recently I have been making my way through. In fact, I'm actually finished with all of the ones that Robert Parker actually wrote. But I'm actually working my way through the Spencer novels that, they made the TV show that really doesn't have a lot to do with the books actually.
I see.
But, the Spencer for Hire show.
Right.
And so I've been reading a lot of those, and in fact I think there's like 50 in the series, and I think I'm on like 48. And Parker himself actually died while he was writing one of them. So, the ones I'm reading now are actually written by Ace Atkins.
Hmm.
But I'm really big on reading those, and so I've read a lot of Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and that sort of thing. And so the Remo Williams books, someone actually recommended that to me, and it's on my list of things to do. So, um,
Yeah, check it out. It's over the top, silliness, but also gets good. She's deliciously good.
well, at the time, I went back and I realized I needed some time to kind of wind down, and I needed something that wasn't science fiction related to do
Mm-hmm.
so. And because I'd been writing so much Clement Sector and Earth Sector, I just needed something to kind of wind down. And so somebody mentioned that I could, you really ought to read all these Raymond Chandler novels you have laying around. And so I started reading those, and then I moved to Dashiell Hammett, and then I was looking for something else to read, and then a friend of mine, Howard Whitehouse, pointed out that I should read Lawrence Block, and so I read several of Lawrence Block's series, which are fantastic. And I was looking for something else to read. I read some of the Flashman books, which are really good. And then went through the Spencer books, and yeah, the Remo Williams stuff is actually, I mean, I've got a little pile of books, on my desk that I'm working my way through, and so yeah,
Yeah, it'll
the
give you a good
the next
chuckle,
step.
and also, the guy's like a really awesome killer assassin, but he has this annoying, like, Chinese master who's always tormenting him and stuff. But yeah, it's hilarious.
Well, I saw the movie, but I
No,
also
no,
know that
no, no, no,
the
no.
movie has nothing to do with it, I'm
No,
sure,
no,
because
no.
much like the James Bond movies and,
There's
well,
some
the
Easter
long
eggs in the movie, but it's not really. I mean, it's generally speaking, but I never imagined it that horribly cheesy.
well, it's kind of like I read the Longmire series
Yeah.
after having watched the television show, and the
Hmm.
two have absolutely nothing to do with each other whatsoever.
Right, right. All
Except that
right.
he's a sheriff in Wyoming.
All right. Well, let's get back on the sci-fi track here. What's the so you told me that you were inspired to create Clement Sector over time based on stuff that you generated for your own players and stuff. And, I was going over the content, and there's so many. I mean, you have a lot of careers in there. What's your favorite Clement Sector career?
My favorite career is actually a combination of gambler and bounty hunter because that was the sort of guy that I would generally play if I actually played in a game. I had a character that I used to play quite a bit in several different traveler games that I had the opportunity to play in. It was called. His name was Sean Marlette, and I played him. Oh gosh, 2 or 3 different traveler games, and he was a Boba Fett style Josie Wales sort of bounty hunter
Okay.
who was going around doing all these things. And of course, then I had a big love of Maverick and poker. I love poker,
I'm terrible
and
at
so
poker. I know you have to match some cards. I try to do pairs that are high numbered.
oh, we need to get together and play sometime.
No, you just found out you're going to take all my money.
But yeah, anytime I would make a character like that, he was basically a bounty hunter who was going around, supplementing his income by playing poker, and that's very much a Western idea. And
Hmm.
but yeah, that's the character I would play. So if you were putting together a game, that's the one I would put together.
Sounds like Firefly might be a candidate for maybe one of the better. I like it for cowboy west. I mean, for sci-fi western.
That
Maybe
was
the
a really odd.
quintessential.
That was a really odd thing. I had absolutely no interest in watching Firefly because I had seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer and I didn't care for it. And so I saw a lot of ads that they were, that this guy Joss Whedon was doing he was going to do a science fiction show, and I had no interest in it whatsoever.
Mm.
Didn't watch it. And the evening it came on, I'd say there was probably about 15 minutes into the show, I started getting phone calls from all the people that used to play my game, going, "John, your game is on TV.
Joss Whedon is in your brain.
This is the weirdest thing ever, John. Your game is on TV." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so someone recorded it, brought the tape over to my house, and I watched it. I was like, "Wow, this is weird." And so it became a thing at my house to everybody come over to my house and watch Firefly, and then discuss all the places we thought they'd ripped us off. And it was the most bizarre thing because you go through some of the older maps that I had of Clement Sector, and when I actually decided to publish Clement Sector, we actually changed some of the names because some of the names of the planets were the same as were on Firefly, and it started looking like I'd ripped the map off.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it was really strange. It got to a point to where there's a bit where the bounty hunter is on Serenity and he's got them all, they're all knocked out or something like this. And he's talking to himself and he says something about, having to fight a short person on some planet somewhere. And everybody in the room looked at me and goes, "I don't remember that one." And I'm like, it can't all be from our game. I mean, there's some guy in Kansas right now who's really angry. But yeah. So yeah, it was kind of an odd time for me. We got a good laugh out of it. But in all honesty, seeing that Firefly got a big fan base actually was one of the reasons I thought to myself, another one of those reasons that I pulled the confidence together to say, hey, this is something you can do. So it worked out.
I never got to see Firefly when it was first aired. I was teaching night classes, and on they kept preempting it and moving it. Baseball was on, and then they'd move it to another night and another time. I was like, I can't follow this, and so I missed it, and I felt stupid. But then I was like, well, I guess it wasn't that great. It got canceled. But then I saw the Serenity movie, and I was like, I must watch the rest. So yeah, I love it now. It's great. So tell us what you've been up to the past year. Doing any gaming groups coming out of we're slowly coming out of COVID, but finish up any productions, get any what you been up to since the last time we talked to you?
Well, largely because of COVID, we didn't do as many conventions as we would normally do. Usually do somewhere between 12 and 15 conventions in a year, and last year we did one. So, yeah, there's been a lot of things have slowed down. We're certainly spending a lot more time working on things, and that was one of the things that led up to the giant tome that I sent you the other day, which was the new Clement Sector Third Edition.
Yeah, it's ginormous. It's like the size of my fifth edition Champions books, or it's like as big as any of the biggest like Champions books. It's it's impressive piece of work, and so it looks like you took a bunch of your smaller stuff and smushed it all together into a giant compendium, or has it always been this big?
Well, as much as I was, as I was talking about earlier, as much as I absolutely positively love the, idea of having a ton of books, um, realistically, it was getting more and more difficult for someone to just jump onto the Clement Sector bandwagon, and without having to go out and buy 10, 12 books to understand everything that had happened as I was building through it.
Right.
And so it really became it really became a necessity, I thought, to put everything you needed to know to run the game into one book. That way, you didn't have to buy 12 books to understand what was going on.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that was the main thing. And even though it's such a ginormous book, it really is. I mean, you could use it as a weapon. Um, I really felt that it was really the right thing to do, and and it seemed the right thing to do. And so I wanted to put that together. And of course, having a lot more time with COVID to be able to sit down and work on it and not be out doing anything else. It really was the right time to do it, I thought. And so we've updated that. We put that together. I pulled together several books for that, and then added a lot of stuff. Wrote a lot of new material for it. Put a lot of new art in it. We had some great artists come in and work on that.
Yeah, I love the corporate logos, and yeah, it's really well thought out. It's so complete. It's got so much stuff in it. It's well over 600 pages, and everything I looked at was covered pretty completely. I didn't come away with any questions about how something worked or whatever, and yeah, I'm just impressed. I mean, it's really, and like you say, well, from my perspective, putting together a ginormous book like a Champions book, it doesn't preclude you from putting out expansions later, like they have, adventures and whatnot. So the GM and the play, or at least the GM has the entire book with all of the rules that they need, and they can just go. It has setting, it has maps. I mean, it's really complete. You did a great job.
Thank you. I
Kudos
appreciate
to you.
that.
Yeah. So
Yeah, we
how long did it
definitely have
take?
more.
I mean, how long did it take to put together that stuff and edit it?
A long time.
Mhm.
Yeah. I thought my editor was going to kill me. But
Yeah.
but but yeah, it took a while. I mean, it was several months. It was several months putting it all together, and wondering what should go in and what shouldn't go in. And of course, we're still putting source books out. I mean, there's still going to be more added on to it, but everything you really need to understand what Clement Sector is and what's going on with Clement Sector, you can get in that one book.
Would you say
So that's
what aspect of that book makes you the most proud? Like you can humble
Oh
brag.
wow, really all of it. I mean, just
Is this your biggest production? Like,
it's by far the biggest thing we've ever
mhm.
done. Yeah. The average book we put out is somewhere in the range of around 150, 200 pages. And, this is 675. So yeah, and with something that big, you have to put together. Not a, I'm a really big believer in a really detailed table of contents, which a lot of people are like, John, your table of contents is 10 pages long, and I'm like, yeah, because I want you to find everything.
Well, it's as long as it
Um,
needs to be. I mean
Yeah.
that has your table of contents almost serves as a secondary or primary index. I mean, your index is awesome, but like you say, the table of contents covers all the level 1 and 2 headings, and you know, at least
Well,
there's. But I mean, it's pretty complete. I appreciate
that
that
was
because I
actually
like to look up stuff quickly.
yeah, that was actually something that really was a weakness, I think, with the last edition of Clement Sector is that we did not have an index. And a lot of that was because I thought, well, I've got a really detailed table of contents, but a lot of people really wanted an index. And as time passed, it became obvious that really that's something I should have done from the beginning and kind of felt foolish about it after that. And so, we definitely wanted to make sure this thing had an index because it's 675 pages long.
Yes,
You're
yeah.
going to have one.
The longer it
And
gets, the more important that is. I was just talking to a user just before this interview, and I was asking them what was the problem with something, and they said that there was a lack of an index and that they couldn't look things up, and things were scattered all over, and how are they supposed to find it?
yeah,
So
and that was one of the,
index,
that was one of the real drivers of doing third edition for us was an index and being able to find everything because as it was, if you were to have picked up the old Clement Sector core setting book for that was the second edition of Clement Sector, and you picked that up and you were to read through all of it, then you had to go out and buy Balancing Act, which was another book that we had that would explain how all these worlds got along and their politics and so forth and so on.
right?
And so it's so much better to just take that and roll it into the main book.
Yeah,
A lot of those things, like you were talking about the corporate logos, that all came from another book called Almighty Credit, that we did, that we wanted to put all those things out there. So much better to have that in one book. So it's the most pricey book we've ever put out. I mean, the PDF is around 24.99, and the physical book is going to cost you about $65. And it's certainly the largest and the biggest project we've ever done. And you know, but I think it needed to be done. I think it was something we did. And one of the things we tried to do is, everybody who had already bought Clement Sector from either our web store or from Drive Through RPG, we gave them a really good discount on it because I just didn't feel good about, hey, you're going to have to rebuy everything we just sold you over the last few years. And in a way, the folks who had really been loyal to us and had bought all these books, I didn't want you to have to go back and do that. And so, it was 24.99 for folks who were just getting into it.
uh-huh.
But I was giving everybody who had bought the book previously. We sent out a coupon through Drive Through RPG, and then we had a special code that we sent out to everybody from the website. And so we were doing that for about $2.50.
Well, that's generous.
Well, I mean, it
You
just
want to
seemed
keep
the right.
goodwill.
It seemed the right thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. You want to keep
You
goodwill
know,
with your customers, and people don't want
yeah.
to feel pissed because they bought something, now they got to rebuy it.
I don't want to call anybody out, but it rhymes with slaw hammer. I bought into Slawhammer Fantasy Battles many
Uh-huh.
years ago, and then every time I'd get to the end of it, they would, and every time I'd get an army painted, they would come out with the new version, and it
Right.
would just make me madder and madder and madder. And I didn't want to do that to people. I
Yeah, back in the day when Warhammer 40K first came out, the armors and weapons and all that stuff were like rare, uncommon, common. Like you would just buy a pack and then you got what came in it. It wasn't until later that it was a standard pack that came with 5 bolters,
right.
5 chainswords,
Yeah,
or
it
whatever.
was one of those things. One of
It
my
was like
friends
a
over there.
collectible miniature game, and I was like, nope, screw this.
Yeah. The fantasy battles was the same way. I mean, it
Mm,
seemed like every time it was like, oh, they put the Dark Elves out and they're talking about a Chaos Dwarf book. It must be time for the next edition.
right, right.
And
So
yeah,
your the Clement sector covers some things that I don't see in other that are not covered in some of the other sci-fi games I've played, which is the Altrans and Uplifts. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Altrants is the word that we came up with for those folks who have been genetically altered. So basically we had a good group of different Altrants who are in there who, folks who can breathe underwater, folks who are bred for combat, this sort of thing.
Right.
And so that was the word we came up with for that was Altrant.
Hmm.
Um, and that was something we actually had started coming up with back when I was in college, and it was something we kind of brainstormed and put together. And then, of course, uplifts, which are animals who have been raised to human equivalent intelligence. Yeah, and so we have a lot of those as well.
How do you
There's no.
how do the animals communicate? Can they speak English? I mean, or do they need some sort of translator device? Do they still speak their animal language?
It's really according to which animal you're talking about.
I see.
Some of them actually can, just straight up speak English, and then some of them have voice boxes that allow them to do so.
I see.
Um, One of the things we have, one of the supplements we have is called Tree of Life. It's Altrants and Clement Sector, and it actually allows you to sort of build your own. So it's in that regard, it's sort of a callback to the time when I was playing Champions.
Hmm.
So you can in fact kind of build a alternate character that has wings and is more combat oriented than say your average person. And so there's that. And I've always been a big fan of uplifts, and I wanted to do that. And even though we don't have any aliens per se in Clement Sector, we do in fact have some animals that originated from alien worlds who have since been uplifted. So in that regard, there is sort of aliens in Clement Sector,
Hmm.
but for the most part, we've tried to stay away from live aliens in Clement Sector. In Earth Sector, we do in fact have aliens, but yeah,
All right.
yeah. I think the space western works better without aliens, and I've kind of always felt like that, and so I've kind of stuck with that with Clement Sector. And I'm
I
kind of
see.
yeah. I've had some folks like, no, John, we should have that. And I'm like, no.
Well, you can take the place of aliens with the other two, the uplifts and the Altrans. So,
Right. Well, that
um,
was kind of the plan, really.
right,
That was kind of the way we thought of it. I mean, if you're going to play a lion guy, why not just play an uplifted lion?
right, right. And if you look at stuff like Stargate, I mean, they don't really ever run across aliens. It's humans everywhere they go,
Yeah.
and not even bumpy-headed ones or variations of bumpy. One thing I noticed about the Clement Sector book was there was a more rounded character history. Like you have familial relations and like some like backstory events and things that happen. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I I have always been a fan of life character. What do you call it? Life path character generation?
Hmm.
And that I've always been a huge fan of that idea. And I really felt like the more we could put into it, the more detail we could put into it, the better. Janelle Jacquis came up with central casting, of
Love
which I
that
was a
book, Central Casting for sci-fi.
I was a huge fan of that.
Hmm.
And gosh, I think there were three of them. I think there was a present, a fantasy, and a future. I had all three of them, and I was a huge fan of that. And so I thought, if I could bring that sort of flavor to it, that would be something we could really, delve into.
Hmm.
Folks who wanted to could delve into that, and you could have a whole, character history with your family history, and you could have, all these events that happened to you when you were young and when you were a teenager, and all these things that led you to become who you are. Because I think, most people live a life that way. You are who you are because of the things that have happened to you over the time you've been
Right.
alive.
Sure.
And so it really felt like that was a good way of doing character generation. And of course, there are folks who would rather not. And we do have diverse roles, which
Hmm.
is another source book that has a lot of character careers in it as well. But there's also a option to go ahead and build a character. And so if you don't like the life path character generation, we've got options for you. But I'm a huge fan of it. I absolutely love it. And so the idea of having that whole background built for you there it's just fantastic to me. And of course,
I
that doesn't stop anybody who comes up with their own background.
right.
In
Some
fact, I
people just
encourage.
have a hard time. My players, I gave them all a chance to just come up with their own backstory, and most of them, they are orphans and don't know don't know their history. Like only
Right.
2 of my 8 players came up with a story about their character, why they're here, other than what the character system generates for you.
It's
But
so much easier
like,
to
how many
have an
orphans are there?
Yeah, to me, it's just so much easier to have an option for your players that you don't have to put them on the spot and say, "Hey,
Sure.
come up with a background for this
Or even
character."
just like instead of making it random, like pick one of the things off this chart that looks appealing to you. So
Yeah,
you're not
absolutely.
tossed in a turbulent history. You kind of at least get a little choice in where you take your life, even though it's not always
Well,
going where you want.
well, one of the things I always point out in the book is first off, if you're rolling a character that you don't like, stop.
Right.
Um, you
Yeah, you
know,
don't like
you know,
that result, roll it again.
yeah, yeah, do another one.
Right.
There's no. I don't like the idea that you're going to roll up a character and well, this is a miserable character and I
Right.
don't like playing it,
Exactly.
but you're
Someone you're never
stuck
going
with
to
it because
like.
that's what you rolled.
Right.
You're stuck with it because that's what you rolled. No, no,
Right.
no, 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 no. If you're doing that to people, you're doing it wrong to me. I really think you should be able to re-roll those things, and if you have somebody who sits down at your table who says, hey, I've got this idea and I want to do it this way, roll with it.
Right.
Go. Take that person's imagination and run.
Right.
But not everybody's going to be able to do that, and everybody wants to do that.
Right.
And you can just kind of run them through the early years and so forth. In Clement Sector, and they've got a instant background, and there you go.
Can go from there. So tell us about some of your other popular titles in your product line.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
What are some of your other popular titles from your product?
Oh well, right now Ryder is doing really well.
Not sci-fi, but awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's basically it takes the Cepheus engine rules and runs it as a Western. And yeah, it's all kinds of fun. And of course, since I've spent years doing space westerns, it just seemed the natural thing to do. It's just a straight up western. It's nothing like Deadlands or anything
Okay,
like that.
it's more like Boot Hill and less like Deadland.
Yes, very much
Okay.
so. It's basically just a straight up western. We've got the Bane rules out, and we've got the city of town, I should say, of New Liberty, and it's a fictional town that's located in southeastern Wyoming. And of course, you know about that because you're one of our licensees who's doing things for that, and which that's just fantastic. I'm loving that.
I'm
Doing
happy
VTT
to.
stuff.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. We're converting the. I'm trying to get the New Liberty setting converted to ETT for John. So full disclosure out there. Anyway,
But
yeah,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
having great fun with it, and I'm glad you're
yeah,
pleased.
right. Ryder's doing really well, and I'm really proud of it, and I'm really, really pleased that it's doing as well as it is. And of course, we have Earth Sector, which sort of expands Clement Sector, lets you know what happened on the other side of the wormhole after the wormhole collapsed, and everybody was over in Clement Sector. Everybody would come to me and say, "Well, what happened to Earth Sector?" And so we've got Earth Sector out there to explain that and show you what all's going on over there, and you could play over there, and it's just that's a great thing.
Cool. And so, what do you
And
have? What are your plans for the next year?
well, right now I'm working on a Starport source book. I've got several artists working on things for that, and I'm oh gosh, in the middle of writing it. And then we have Michael Johnson, who does our Starship books, is working on a Starport generation system, so he's working on that. And so we've got that coming up. We just recently, as I'm speaking to you, we just recently put out the Trade Empire commercial transport, which is a really huge super freighter for Earth Sector, and we're working on a smaller freighter, which by the time this is out there, most folks probably will have seen it by then, I think, called the Pleiades, which is basically a smaller version of our Atlas freighter. We've got a lot of irons in the fire. I've been talking to a lot of people about putting together some adventures and campaigns, and that's really the thing I think right now that I think I need more of is individual adventures and campaigns. We've got the 21 Plot series out there with just well over 100 different small adventures for folks. But I really want to put together some more campaigns. We have about 5 of them out now. And I'd really like to put together some more campaigns. And so I really see that coming along in the future in the next year or so.
Wow, sounds like you're gonna be busy. That's a
That's the way I like it.
yeah. That's when I say ambitious, it's an ambitious amount of stuff on your plate there. But good luck to you to finish it off. And I hope next time we talk, you'll have all of these things finished, and we'll be able to talk about those things some more. So fantastic! I look forward to all that new stuff coming out. Where can people find your products?
Oh, well, you can find us on Drive Through RPG. Just go to Independence Games there. If you need to, you can follow to Traveler and then Cepheus Engine, and we're in there. Or you can just go into the search bar and type in Independence Games. You'll find us there. And we have the Independence Games web store. You can find most everything there. We don't have print on the web store yet, so if you want print, you'll have to go to Drive Through RPG. But if you want PDFs, you can go to independencerpgs.com, and you can find all of our PDFs there.
Fantastic, awesome. Well, we've come to the end of our interview.
Well, that was fun. I enjoy it. I have a blast doing this every year anyway. So it's something I look forward to doing. So I really enjoy it.
Well, thanks, John. I'm so glad that you came back, and it's been nice to meet you in this endeavor. And yeah, I've made a lot of cool friends, and you're one of them. So thank you. And folks out there, I'm your host, Frank Succardi, also known as CyborgPrime, and I've been talking with John Watts of Independence Games today. John, thank you for participating in our 4th annual Traveler Mayday event. And I hope you'll join us again next year.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Fantastic. And thank you, dear listener, for joining us for our 4th annual Traveler Mayday event. That's all for now, travelers. Until next time, happy traveling.
This data crystal will self-destruct in 5 seconds.